Well, hello again, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Triangular Compass. And my name is Will Wisner, and I'm the Executive Director here at the Grunt Style Foundation. And joining me today is one of my most very favorite people because he's just that interesting. It's Mr. John Launius. John, thanks for coming on to our episode today to teach us about all things healing by way of the modality of incense. You are someone I respect and admire greatly. I think you're just a hoot to talk to anytime I get a chance to be around you. We always have great conversations, and we'll jump into this. And so I'm going to read your bio because I don't want to miss anything. You've got a lot to unpack here. So I'm going to actually read it from the bio sheet so I don't get anything wrong. So John Launius is the Director of Community Outreach at the Special Operations Charity Network, where he supports active duty military, veterans, and first responders through education, connection, and well-being initiatives. He's the founder of Shihan Wellness, offering hypnosis services, self-defense training, and the Incense Journey, an experiential approach to regulation and focus. John also serves as Director of Strategic Operations at Lifetime Media, a national footprint media company creating work across the United States and internationally. So welcome again to the show, John.
Thanks, Will.
You bet, brother.
So great to see you.
Yes, it's always fun, man. So let's start with the first big one. So you are a Komoto, which is a pretty fancy title. Why don't you tell us about what that means and how that plays out in what you do?
Yeah, so a Japanese Komoto is essentially a tea master, but for the Japanese incense ceremony, which in its codified form goes back 500 years, but it traces 1,500 years back to the spread of Buddhism through the Korean peninsula. And so when I was 9 years old, I started studying two things, incense and martial arts. And my mother decided to send me to martial arts after my brother, who's a person with a disability, he was getting beat up in the neighborhood. And I was like, I'm going to go protect my brother. And I would end up getting the same treatment that he did. And so, again, in her infinite wisdom, she sent me to martial arts class, which all that did was get me beat up even more. But it did pay off in the long run. But Mr. Black was burning what I would call bad incense. He was burning a really poor quality agarbatti. And agarbatti is the incense that most people recognize or see at gas stations and head shops and things like that.
A little patchouli.
Right.
Yeah.
So, or names like love and lust and money, right?
Money,
right? And so I took some home without telling my mom, and I was burning it in my bedroom, and suddenly from across the house you hear... Boom, kicks the door in. What are you doing? I'm burning incense. You can't do that. What do you mean I can't do that? She said, you can do it. You just got to tell me because you're 9 years old.
Yeah.
Right? And so what started out of that was that my mother was a hippie and my dad was an Air Force veteran. And so if you spend any amount of time with me, I'm like the perfect mix between the two of them. But my mother gave me a book on world religions, and she said, if this is something that's interesting to you, then you should study it. And so I'm glad she did that, because from the ages of 9 to 13, I studied on my own. And then at 13, I would have this auspicious experience where my first media partner, his parents were pretty famous. They knew Liberace, they knew Lucille Ball, they knew all of these names from like the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And they would have these parties at their house, which was very bohemian. But I would get invited to come and hang out with him, essentially, keep him busy so that they could have fun as adults, right? Well, anyway, I had to go downstairs and get water at one point. And when I went downstairs, his mother stops me and turns to this woman and says, oh, you need to meet our son's friend, John. He's really into incense. And this woman turns to me and she says, what do you know about incense? And I said whatever I said. And then she said, what do you know about the Japanese tradition of incense? And then I started to spout a little of the history that I knew. And she said, interesting. You really do know this. And I said, well, I know it enough. And so she said, would you like to learn it for real? And so where some kids, I said yes. So where some kids go off to violin school for 10 years, I went to incense school for 10 years. And it would have been a lot longer, but unfortunately she passed away in 1994. And so that would set the stage for essentially the last 44 years where I have lectured internationally on the subject for people that are known by their names and their reputation, and people that are just regular everyday human beings going about their life. And the reason why that I make a juxtaposition between the two of those things is that regardless of whether you are famous or whether you're not famous, is that you're still a human being. At least most people.
Most people.
We could get into the lizard people, but that's a different
the whole Epstein crowd, right?
Right. If you want, we could go down that road. What's interesting about the Epstein files, there actually is a couple of emails that mention incense because he was trying to infiltrate one of the oldest incense companies in Japan. True story. Doris Davis actually found that and sent me that information. She goes, "What do you know about this?" And I'm looking through it and I'm like, well, I know that name. I don't know them personally, right? But isn't it interesting how the Epstein files at this point, and we've just started, right? They seem to cover kind of everything right? Yeah. Across all of society, which that could mean a couple different things, but that wasn't the focus of your
the question. We went down a rabbit hole. Maybe we'll circle back to that.
Maybe we will. But it's it's really about being human, because when you look at a lot of your guests, like I was watching Alina, who was on recently, as I was watching Dr. Scott on recently, and it's like these modalities that we talk about, they're not new.
Right. That's right.
In many cases, they're thousands of years old. And in many cases, they've been erased from our history, I think, in many ways, to keep the masses, maybe not a few, but keep the masses away from actually accessing their higher selves, their connection to the divine, etc. I don't think it's an accident at all that, the enlightened individuals, for the most part throughout history, have only been a handful in relation to the rest of the population. Yeah. Now that's another rabbit hole that we might be able to connect to the Luciferians and all this other stuff if you want. But, there we go.
That is a lot of interest for a 9-year-old boy to start on a journey that's going to go that long. What was it about the incense when you're 9? I mean, I get like things speaking to you and you get an interest in something, and you kind of find something that resonates. But at 9 years old, incense, what was it about the incense that turned you on?
Well, actually, a number of different things. So I usually don't talk about this, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it now because I think it's really interesting, at least in my own experience. Now, whether or not this was a dream, I don't think that it was. But when I was about 4 years old, and I know I was 4 because my parents had not divorced yet. They divorced when I was 5. But right around the age of 4, I was holding my teddy bear in my original house where I grew up in, and I bit the eye of the teddy bear, and the eye came off and went down my throat and lodged to where I couldn't breathe. Oh, yeah. And all of a sudden in the room, a light being showed up, grabbed me by the back of the head, and held me over the bed until this fell out. And then right after that, it disappeared. And then what seemed like 10 minutes later, what I would interpret as what you might consider a demon tried to kick me down the second floor stairs of where I was sleeping. And so from a very, very early age, I had an understanding of the difference between good and evil. And so by the time that I would interact with incense at the age of 9 is that what I noticed was that it calmed me. It centered me. I was fascinated by the fragrance. I was mesmerized by watching the smoke tendrils move. Now, I would learn this later in studying neuroscience and studying psychology and studying a lot of different religious cultures, especially the difference between angels and demons and other types of nefarious spirits that may exist in the world, was that our brain needs to see water. And when you start to understand Hermetic philosophy, for example, as above, so below, one of the adages is that when you're looking at incense smoke, and there's indirect and direct burning. If you're direct burning, you're going to get more smoke than indirect burning, which is just pure fragrance. Like what we're doing today in here is indirect, so there's not a lot of smoke at all. But when you're watching the smoke tendrils move, your brain, that satisfies the same part of it that needs to see water. And so you could make an argument that the quality of air with the smoke and then the use of water that is content with the low places that people disdain, by connecting those two things, you're connecting what we would call in the Japanese tenshin, heaven and earth. And so I don't normally talk about this publicly in any way, shape, or form, because this is such an esoteric art that usually when I'm dealing with working with my personal students, who are members of what we call a RU, is that my currency between them are the questions. And so when I was, I'll just tell you, when I was 14 years old, a year into my training, my teacher said to me, she said, okay, you've been training now for a year. Going forward, if you don't ask me a question, I have no obligation to teach you. Well, think about what you're doing at 14 years old. At 14, you're going to school and information is being jammed into your head. And so for your teacher, learning something that you've made a commitment to do for the rest of your life suddenly says, unless you ask a question, I have no obligation to teach you. It completely altered the way that I deal with reality. And so when I want to get to know somebody, I'm like that 9-year-old kid going, so Will, what happened then? So Will, what happened then? And making a little bit of a joke, but it made me, or forced me, to start to have a relationship with people around me where I'm actually inquisitive and I'm asking questions, because two things happen when you ask a question. Number one, you humble yourself. And then number two, that part of your brain that wants that answer fully opens up. In other words, I can get value and benefit from going to listen to a TED Talk or anything else. But when I'm able to ask a question of the expert that may be on the stage, then that part of my brain fully opens, and it's a much deeper transformation.
Now, this is all part of this philosophy of this art form of this incense.
Absolutely, it is. Well, because so going back to what the meaning of a Komoto is that, technically the definition of my title is that I'm a master of ceremonies in the Japanese incense tradition. It does not signify that I am a master, but that's the title. In other words, in the Eastern tradition, you never call yourself a master. That is for somebody else to decide, not for you. But for the sake of this conversation, that is the actual definition of what that means. And so that means that I've been trained in kumiko. I've been trained in a number of different distinctions in being able to present different ceremonies and also different games related to the refinement of our consciousness and the refinement of our sense of smell. For the most part, our sense of smell is considered our repressed sense. It's that part of ourselves that's connected to, yes, our subconscious, but more specifically our limbic system. And our limbic system is what controls our memories and our emotions and our feelings. In other words, if you didn't know anything about your history, you would have no idea who you are. And so as we move through life and life happens to us, right? We have what's referred to in hypnosis, and I'm also a hypnotist, as you said in the beginning. But it's like, if you look back across your entire life, you have imprints that are positive and negative, right? You won an award. That's a positive imprint. Oh, I succeeded at this. Maybe I should move in that direction. And you've also had your failures, which that's another part of an imprint. Oh, it's like, I can't talk to pretty girls because I get shot down all the time.
Right.
Right. And so this becomes the balance between our successes and our failures. And when we are able to reintegrate those things, put those things to rest in so many ways, not forget them, but complete them, then we return back to what I would call the original self, like that part of ourselves that when we were usually between the ages of like being born and about 5 or 6 years old, you're in that kind of state of being, like nothing, like you're not connected to really anything in the universe. But then all of a sudden one day somebody says microphone, and they say, glass, mushroom, or they say 12 gauge coasters, which I didn't know those were coasters till right now. That's kind of funny.
Yes, they are.
And so then once we start to get integrated into the world, is that, we have an agreement that this is a microphone arm, right? But if I didn't know what this was, I could turn it into whatever I want. Right. And so the whole tradition around the Way of Incense, capital Way, is about refinement. It's about refinement of our mind, our body, our spirit, how we view reality around us, because good and bad, we see the world the way the world sees us in so many ways.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So one of my most very favorite books in the whole world is called the Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Yeah. And basically what you're explaining there, as I understand what you're saying, it is pretty well the Toltec wisdom of what is an agreement? Well, it's our understanding of how things work and where do we get these things. It's what we're conditioned by, either through this John cries, bad baby, you get in trouble. John does whatever good. John's a good boy. You get mommy love, daddy love. Then it goes into the siblings and religious education and formation, and then societal interactions in school and rejection by girls. That's pretty much, I think, how Don Miguel actually conveys it. So that's fascinating that you've got two entire different ways of some pretty heavy thoughts from two different places in the world that are that parallel.
Yeah.
How crazy.
Well, but I don't think it is crazy. What I think it is that we're pointing to the human experience. Is that, obviously, Will, you and I have very different backgrounds and very different presence, right? But you and I both are having the human experience.
Sure.
And so we're going to have our successes, our failures. We're going to have all of that. And, as has been said by many of your guests, is that there's many paths up the mountain.
That's right.
And the more, my grandfather was a Christian mystic, and he was a huge influence on me. And he would say, John, the more things you study everything, and the more things you study deep enough, the more they connect. And he was absolutely right. And so when I'm studying, whether it's incense, martial arts, hypnosis, media, it doesn't matter. Is that if I study it deep enough, they all start to connect.
Right.
And so, my ability as a Komoto, my job number one is to lead without imposing my will. And so the currency between us from an official level, an official historical whatever level, is that if you don't ask a question, I have no obligation to teach. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to say anything. I have events that I present that I want to present that allow me to speak about subjects that I think are interesting. But when it starts getting into your own spiritual journey, I will never be someone who sits up on a pedestal in flowing white robes. I mean, I do have like Komotos, but that's a different story, right? But I will never be that person that says, I know it all, because I don't know it all. I have no idea. It's like when we look at the universe and we look at everything around us, all I can look at is what works for me. And so if someone is inspired to ask a question, then I'm going to answer that question based on what they need, not on what I think that they want or that what I think that they should have. And this kind of relates to the fact that, in the 90s, I had the largest incense store in the entire country. This is pre-internet. And part of the reason why that I stopped selling incense is because it got in the way of being an incense teacher. And you think to yourself, incense teacher, how does that even work, right? But it's like when you look at the teachings of incense, it gets pretty interesting. Part of the reason why that we have incense products like incense sticks and cones and coils is that, yes, we needed something to be able to sell throughout history, right? But the history of that comes from the fact that the ashrams and the temples that were burning incense, they wanted to be able to sell that to their followers so that you could benefit the church or you could benefit the temple or the ashram or things like that. Well, but before that, incense was all available to you in nature, which that's what it is.
It's resin, a lot of it.
It's resin, it's wood, powder, it's leaves, it's you name it, right? The Latin for the word incense comes from incensum, meaning to burn through. And so by definition, and this will sound maybe a little, like a left turn here, but because we are warming incense primarily in the Japanese tradition, yes, there are two different forms, but when I'm cooking, by definition, that could be that I'm actually doing incense, because let's say I'm taking that Wagyu steak and I'm putting it on the grill at the perfect temperature, right? If I throw it directly into the charcoal, it might smell good for a minute or two, but I've ruined the entire meal. And so this becomes a metaphor or an analogy, depending on how we want to use it, where if I am always at the proper temperature with Will Wisner, if I'm at the proper temperature, with anybody that I'm communicating with, then we can actually have an interaction of true fragrance. In other words, when you and I first met, we were pretty much having a cold relationship, meaning, like from sales, we call them cold calls, right? I don't know you, so I'm going to have to do a little, dance to have you understand who I am. You and I go back and forth until we finally go, okay, I like this guy enough where I'll start to warm up. Well, once you've warmed up, then we're actually able to have a meaningful conversation that's more than just surface, right? Now, on the other hand, if you and I get into an argument, well, then it becomes heated, where it becomes too hot, right? And so as Komotos, we look at a whole number of different things related to the transformation not only of our mind, but also of the minds of those that we're working with. And so, for example, I mean, this because we talked about it, but, I was just at the Home Healing Center, doing an incense journey, and we're there every single month, right? So every month we're at Home Healing Center where I pick a subject and I pick fragrances, and I allow everybody in the room to listen to the fragrances. Now, if you just caught that, some people are like, wait a minute, that seems a little nonsensical. What do you mean listening? Well, in the Japanese tradition of incense, we call it monko. And monko is that we're listening to the fragrance for what it actually is delivering us, right? So if you have somebody who enjoys, the smell of rose, I would say, okay, listen to the rose. They're like, oh, I really like this. It reminds me of my grandmother. And so you're listening to that imprint, that emotional imprint from the past, where you are then able to be informed by certain things. And so there's a lot to Monko more than just the concept itself, but we use it in different ways to not only regulate our mind, body, and spirit, but also refine our sense of smell and refine our awareness. The last point I'll make before I throw it back to you is this. Because of olfactory habituation, part of the reason why that fragrance doesn't get a lot of focus is because it disappears for us. Usually the story I tell is this. If you walk into my house and there's nothing burning, nothing cooking, whatever, my house has its own fragrance, right? Just like you do. Like if I walked over and sniffed you, which I'm not going to do, you would have a very particular fragrance in the same way that I would. Well, if I'm around you for more than about 30 or 40 seconds and you're in my house for more than 30 or 40 seconds, you no longer smell it. Because of the way that our fight or flight and freeze mechanism works is that if the state isn't changing, I don't need to worry about that because I don't need to defend myself or survive or any of that. Mm-hmm. And so it goes invisible. And so we use this as a way to focus on our awareness and our perception. And this is what the samurai did for almost 600 years. When the samurai, the elite fighting forces of Japan, figured out that, we can't just go out into battle and do what we need to do and then hope to be normal human beings. They started to figure out that we need to regulate ourselves. And so how they started to regulate themselves were things like tea ceremony, an incense ceremony, flower arranging, all of the do arts. So chado, kado. And so again, this became a way to regulate.
Wow. So that is a lot of information.
Listen, we can talk for 20 hours if you so desire.
I know. I'm sure we could. Well, you know what? Let's set the stage for the audience. It's here we have your setup is currently going. And, of course, folks watching at home are going to be able to smell this incredible fragrance that you have going on. But I wanted to kind of describe here what's happening. You're right. This is, you can smell it. You can definitely tell that this is not gas station incense, like you said. This is not the old, put the little stick thing in the little incense holder from Spencer's Gifts or wherever you may get it. This smells like quality. Yeah. It's just different. It's the only way I can really explain it. It's very pleasant. It's like, when you go to church and they're, the priest is, with the censer and the incense, that is always in this like above, it's like, wow, that's real incense. It's not the stuff that you get at those junk shops. This definitely comes through that way. So what are we smelling here? Yeah.
So what we're doing right now is that we're using a warmer. This warmer is from Mermaid Magical Arts, and you can find them online at mermaidarts.com. But I have Old Mountain Sandalwood. So Old Mountain Sandalwood is the oldest form of sandalwood that I'm able to get access to. It comes from the Mysore forest in India. True sandalwood only comes from India. There are other sandalwoods like Australia. You can get them from a number of different places, but this is Santalum album. Santalum album is the original sandalwood. And
I can smell, like I can recognize, because I burn the junk incense. I like the junk incense. I don't have access to the fancy stuff, but it's
not yet.
Not yet. You're right. We'll set something up after this. Maybe we'll get that store back in business for it. But because I'd buy it. This is good stuff. But no, I recognize the scent of sandalwood, but at the same time, I'm like, oh yeah, this is not the stuff I'm used to smelling of sandalwood. This is something more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, here's the way that I describe it sometimes to people is that if you one day grew up in a town that the town only had a McDonald's, and you learned that that was the only food source and that was the best food source in the whole world, that is the equivalent to you buying nothing but those incenses we made jokes about earlier with names like luck and money and lust, and they're like, bright purple and bright orange and iridescent green, right? Well, that's not what we're doing here, right? Those are synthetics that are actually bad for you. They put particles in the air. Indoor air pollution is sometimes the way it's described. But what you're getting here is you're getting pure fragrance. You're getting the way that the divine intended it, by whatever name you want to call it. And the reason why I say it that way is because every religion and every culture has had incense going back to the beginning.
Right.
And so what I just added here was something called Drybalanops aromatica. And Drybalanops aromatica is Borneo camphor. Borneo camphor comes from the island of Borneo. And here, I'll tell you the story and how to get it. Okay. Only the native peoples on Borneo are allowed to collect this. And when they collect it, they actually wrap themselves in the bark of this tree. And only there's a small slit for their eyes. And then when they go and they take the hatchet and hit the tree, if they are not covered in the bark of the tree, the liquefied resin that comes out of there will burn their entire body.
What?
Yes. So
like acid burn them?
Like acid burn them, right? So this is a very difficult thing to get, but here's what's great about it. It's been sold in its actually codified form, meaning that we have records for about 800 years. But we know this goes incredibly back, thousands of years. But this kills 99.9% of bacteria on contact. If you're having any kind of congestion, nasal issues, etc., it works as a bronchial and lung dilator. So So sinus dilator, lung dilator, where it opens everything up. Why is that important? Well, for example, when you were at the incense journey, a couple weeks ago, I was talking about how I said, everybody, there's good coughs and there's bad coughs, right? Good coughs are coughs that are actually are productive, right? And so a lot of inhalers, if people have asthma, they'll use an inhaler which opens up their lungs, and then that phlegm can work its way out. I don't mean to be gross, but this is how this works, right? When we talk about incense actually being something that cleanses you from the inside out, I really do mean that, because we're nothing but a bunch of tubes. If you really think about the human body for a minute, we're nothing but tubes. Our digestive system is a tube. All of our blood veins are blood vessels. Veins. Yeah, blood veins are tubes, right? Everything is a tube. And so by being able to keep these things open, then we're able to get these things that naturally detox out of our body. We're able to get them out faster. And we start to reduce inflammation, and we start to reduce brain fog, and we start to reduce all these things that get in the way of us being fully and truly who we are. And so it becomes a balance of, again, good and evil, if we're going back to that seminal story. And this is something that, I started to have a subconscious, conscious experience of very, very early on. I have done incense in places that there's a lot of psychic and strange energy. And then I've also done incense in places where there isn't that. And, just in the same way, and you and I have talked about more kind of mystical things when we aren't recording, but I'm going to go ahead and bring it up now.
Sure.
It's like when people say, oh, well, you know, you believe in spirits and you believe in all that. I'm like, well, it's not that I believe in them. I've had a direct experience of them, right?
That's right.
It's like, I don't need to believe in something that I know is already real. And so just in the same way that when a ship gets dropped into the ocean, if you leave a ship in the ocean long enough, what happens to the hull below the water? What does it attract?
Like barnacles.
Barnacles, exactly, right? Like all this stuff in the sea that you don't normally see at first. Well, this is the types of things that are happening all the time. You get around certain people and you're like, I don't like that person's vibe. I don't know why, but I don't, right? And then we sometimes it may be felt that we like catch something at a certain event or, you know, things like that. So it goes back to this whole idea of as above, so below. So this is a way to keep yourself clear in every environment. And you've been to enough sweat lodges and experiences to where you've seen indigenous peoples, you know, smoke other people.
Of course, absolutely.
Right? A form of smudging. So again, this is nothing new, and this is also not anything specific to one particular culture or religion.
Right. How cool is that the same concepts of what's going on in Japan happens to line up with what's going on in South America with some of these indigenous traditions that are working with plant medicines. So like we were down in Colombia last year, the country, down the Amazon. We'd taken a group down, veterans, down for the Colombian version of ayahuasca. It's called yahe. And part of that tradition with those folks down there is they work with what they call bitters and sweets. And so, you know, you do it in a cycle, right? Like 3 days of bitters, and then you have a ceremony, and then you do 3 days of sweets. And this is, by that I mean they make a tea. So like for their bitters, they actually use tobacco, which is kind of weird, but they have these big Nicotina rustica. It's they call it mapacho down there. Many people, it's more powerful, way more powerful than North American tobacco. But they basically make a hot tea out of this stuff, and then in the mornings. You do the stuff that goes on in the mornings. It's, you know, exercise and stuff like this. And then you pour this hot tobacco tea over your body, and then you let it set and dry, and you go through the rest of the day like that. And then in the evening hours, you go into this sweat lodge, and this was a little more primitive out where we were in the middle of nowhere, but they had set up a pressure cooker with a rubber hose going to a frame work that had tarps over it. And I tell you what, you want to talk about a hot sauna? Woo, man, yeah. But anyway, they're blasting in tobacco water steam. And the whole idea is that these bitters are pushing off negative energies, the barnacles that form, right? So you're kind of preparing and being ready to receive this psychedelic tea. Right. Then, you know, after you have your first ceremony, then things switch. In the next 3 days, you're setting I think it was basil maybe is what they were using that one, but it's a more sweeter selling. And they do the same thing. You pour it over and then you do the thing. I found that to be fascinating because we do a lot of work with the Lakota, and, you know, they're in the North American traditions with the Plains folks. They have also a version of bitters and sweets, you know, so they're burning sage. That would be their bitters. They're burning flat cedar. That's their sweets, you know, so they're pushing out bad energies and they're bringing in good energies, and they're pushing out bad spirit and bringing in good spirit. Exact same concept. So I don't think that this is anything crazy. This is knowledge that's been understood and accepted in various places across the world for thousands of years.
Yeah. And when you talk about bitters, let's jump to the Japanese for a moment. You know, when I'm working with my direct students in teaching them how to become Komotos, one of the first things we talk about is sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and hot. And so those five senses allow us to actually identify different types of aloes wood so that we understand what they are, whether they're Mataban, Manaka, you know, I could keep going. But the point is that we keep seeing these things over and over again. When you talk about bringing in the bad spirits and the good spirits, for those who may be listening, and it's like, oh, John just went way woo-woo talking about spirits and demons and all this other stuff. It's like, no, if you do the research and you look at the indigenous cultures that, for the most part, are still untouched, right? Like there are anthropological studies where the scientists will actually notice that these cultures are actually talking to beings that cannot be seen with the eye, but they're all talking to them. All of them. Like they're seeing them in their own way. And so there is this thought and this idea around consciousness. I mean, first of all, our consciousness is not localized. I mean, people have thought it was localized forever, but no, it's like we are downloading our consciousness. We are in our body. We are not our body. We are not our body. We have a body, right? And so there is this belief, because of the way we speak and the way that we see the world, we're not able to see other things that may exist in the world. In the same way that, let's go back to the ocean, story, where I don't ever see a barnacle until it's on a ship.
That's right. Where they come from.
Right. Exactly. It's like, how did you get there?
The
right?
magic barnacles.
Right. But if you take a microscope or a telescope, you're actually able to see deeper or further and further into worlds. And so this is also what this is about. This is about expanding your consciousness in a way where you begin to see reality as reality. And why is that important? And what does that really mean? Our sense of smell is the only sense that does not pass through the thalamus. The thalamus is like a regulator. It's like a stoplight, right, for all of our senses that it has to pass through to go to our brain to then make sense of whatever all this stuff is out here, except our sense of smell. Our sense of smell skips the thalamus and goes directly to the rhinencephalon. The rhinencephalon is the oldest part of our brain. So when we are smelling, when we're actually in the act of listening to incense, we are experiencing reality as reality. Not our filters, not our thoughts about what we think reality is, not what I think Will Wisner is or what you think John Launius is that I'm actually able to be with you as another human being beyond all thoughts, desires, concepts, etc. And since we've been talking about different cultures, this is what the Tao talked about. The Tao Te Ching, purportedly written by Lao Tzu, 551 to 479 BCE, is that it talks about how masters are able to see beyond all thoughts, concepts, judgments, and desires. Once you're able to do that, you see reality as reality, and you're not bringing all this baggage with you to everything that you do.
Yeah, that's, again, the parallels are striking, man. There must absolutely be something to be said for this kind of wisdom that's been passed down. Now, for someone to engage with incense, to get out of it what it is that you're talking about, how fast, I guess, or how short of amount of time can you take a novice coming in for the very first time and you're explaining these modalities? I'm assuming you're having to teach some of this so they kind of have a roadmap to follow as they're engaging it. How long does it take before people get it, before they connect in?
Well, so they'll get it the moment that they experience it. So when you were at the incense journey a couple of weeks ago, I mean, you got it immediately, right?
Yeah.
And then, participants of integration, which, by the way, super excited about 2026.
Yeah, looking forward to having you.
September 17th, 18th, and 19th.
That's right.
That's right. I got it right. Yes. So there's about 9 different ways that I can teach you how to burn incense. Now, this will get a little odd maybe for some of you listening. Any audience that invites me to speak, I will go and speak. And so, for example, I get invited a lot by churches where I talk about the biblical connections to incense, right? Depending on which of the 5 translations in English that you choose to follow, incense is mentioned anywhere between 44 and 172 times in the Bible. If we go back even further to the Torah, if we go back, keep going back beyond even Judeo-Christian traditions, is that, when I get invited, for example, let's stay with the church example for a moment. I might talk about the 3 times that incense shows up in Jesus's life, right? The birth, also then when he turns over the money changing tables, that's another place where incense shows up, and we'll save that for later. And then the 3rd time is actually at the crucifixion when they're mixing myrrh and wine together, right? And so you actually 4 times.
The wrapping of the body in the tomb?
Well, it can be that too, but then the night before the crucifixion, when Mary anointed the feet of Jesus with oil of spikenard, very costly. Well, spikenard is an incense. And when you experience spikenard, you will be never more chilled out. Seriously, it's like you're like, oh, okay, there's a crucifixion coming. Okay. Right. Yeah. So it chills you out. And we can use that herb today to combat our stress that we had at work. or different things like that. So, I will also get invited to talk, for example, at like magical lodges, Eastern and Western different types of magic. Now, you might disagree with that, right? But magic is just a different understanding of transformation of consciousness.
And I'm assuming here we're talking about like the Hermetic mystery schools.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly like that. So the point is that since every religion and every culture has had incense, what my teacher did with me over the course of 10 years, she said this: if you're going to be an effective Komoto, since you are not Japanese, you will never be Japanese. No matter how hard you try and how good you are, you will never beat the Japanese at their own game. She said, your job is to be available to all people and not reject anyone.
Yeah.
This is called embodying the light. What is a good man but a bad man's teacher? What is a bad man but a good man's job? If you don't understand this, you'll get lost however intelligent you are. It is the great secret. Now, you'll notice that I gendered it for me. But that quote can be applied to whomever, because that quote actually comes from the Chinese. And in the Chinese language, you don't make the distinction between male and female. You get to choose. So the point is that all of us have this opportunity to be masterful of how we see the world, how we address the world, and how we mitigate the world. And this is another modality that allows you to do that.
So how are you received as a Komodo by folks in the space back in Japan?
Good point. So here's what's interesting. I'm one of the very few Komotos that exist in the world. There are many, many people who will practice aspects of Kodo, Ko meaning incense, Do meaning the way. But my teacher took my paperwork, sent it to Japan, and this would then launch me into work with some pretty well-known figures of the 90s, right? Actor Steven Seagal. I've worked with Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple. I don't want to name drop anymore, but a lot of different people have found their way to this. Some of the reason why is because it can be very expensive. That's part of the reason why that I make my incense journeys as inexpensive as possible based on the agreements I have with the people I work with. Mm-hmm. Because once you understand how this is going to help you, you don't need me. If you want me to coach you and work with you, I'm happy to do that. But my job as a Komoto is to transmit the way of incense so that you can take it and do whatever you want to do with it. Now, for my direct students who are training to become Komotos like myself, I keep telling them that at some point in their training, they'll be expected to innovate the art. Well, the incense journey that I do at Integration Weekend and Home Healing Center and a number of other places around the planet, that is my iteration of actually updating the art for the modern age. Because what I realized is that when I became a Komoto, I was like, all right, I think, I'll have hundreds of people lined up ready to do 4-hour incense journeys or 4-hour traditional Japanese ceremonies. I was wrong. I was totally wrong, right? But there were people that were like, well, can't we just go through a couple of fragrances and can you talk about those? I'm like, yes. And so that was the first iteration of the incense journey came out of a question for people to actually break some of these things down. Remember, when I started this, there was no internet and there weren't even any books on it, at least in English, until around 1996.
Wow.
Yeah. And so a lot of what I was doing very, very early on was just word of mouth and having people learn that. I am no longer interested in teaching the benefits of each one of these from a medicinal standpoint, because it's all available to you. Like if you're an AI person and you want to put in Baswalia Sakra into ChatGPT, it will give you all the benefits of it. I don't need to teach you that. So what I do now is I use it specifically for where you are to get you back to a place of regulation that you're ready to be regulated at. Meaning that I'm not going to force that, but these fragrances that I choose for the journeys based on the topics, by the time that you're done, you're completely aligned with what that intention is, and it is beyond explanation. It's like if I said, remember the smell of a pine tree, all that happened was that you have an image of a pine tree. You can't remember the smell of it because that is not how our human brain works. And so you have to be in the experience of it. And so this is the reason why that you have to be in person for what I do. But back to your original question of like how they get into it and how they do it, is that after every event, and you saw this when we were at Home Healing Center, is that everybody gets a recap document. And the recap document is done electronically. It's done by one of my senior students named Daryl. He's in Michigan. He's fantastic. He's a great tech guy. And so he takes my events and puts them into a mini website. And you're able to get each of the fragrances, a little definition about them, a little work on it, and the botanical name, which is the important part here, and I'll explain that here in a second. And then you also get access to all my vendors. And most of my vendors will give you a discount. And so that's how I have solved allowing people to find their own way, And the reason why I made a distinction on the botanical name is that if you go out on the internet right now and you want to buy frankincense, if it just says frankincense, I don't know which one I just don't know which frankincense it is. And someone says, well, wait, isn't there only one? No, there are 19.
Oh, wow.
There are 19 different types of frankincense and 2 in contention. So Buswalia sacra, Buswalia neglecta, Buswalia serrata, we could keep going, Buswalia occulta. And then each one of those things has a particular medicinal benefit, but also a particular spiritual influence and also mental influence. And once you understand the nuances of that, then when you and I are working together, for example, so I do this thing called the personal incense journey, different from hypnosis. So I do conversational hypnosis and I do fragrance hypnosis, but then I do something called the personal incense journey. If you don't want to do hypnosis with me, then you and I sit for an hour and a half, and I give you a document called the Natural Preference Survey document. And you fill it out, and you tell me what your favorite fragrances are, and it takes 5 minutes to fill it out. But once I look at it, I'm like, okay, what Will needs is this, 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 and this. And then we go through an hour journey with those fragrances. And then the last 30 minutes, though, I leave you in the experience of Chiara. What is Chiara? Chiara is the highest grade aloes wood, Arularia aguilocha, in the world. It costs anywhere between $1,500 and $3,500 a gram.
Good Lord.
Right. But I give you enough to give you a 30-minute experience of it. For 30 minutes, Will, you have maybe 1 or 2 thoughts. You are not stoned. You are not out of it, right? You are literally in the present moment with no thought. Why is that beneficial? How many times in your life, Will, have you not had a thought?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So
0. Right.
So when I was in Europe many years ago, I trained with a number of Buddhist tantric monks. And the best way to explain this when people say, well, what's the value and benefit of this incense experience, is that your mind is like the ocean, and you've heard this maybe before, right? And each thought is like a wave. Well, if the waves are coming in high and hard on the shore, it ruins the shore. And so what we're doing is that we're taking the time between each wave on your shore, on your mind, on your body, on your experience, and we're expanding it until finally you're in that space of peace again. Because most people that come to the incense journey or that I meet for the first time, they have such intrusive thoughts that they don't feel sane. If I can really be honest, right? And so you're learning how to stop the thought or be able to control the thought, because this kind of gets into questions as well. But one of my favorite quotes, actually, you asked me to put a quote. Yeah. Explain that so I can tell the story. Explain this.
Well, it's a secret, man. We don't tell people about this. No, I'm just kidding. We have everybody that comes onto our podcast that's a medicine carrier of some sort. We give them a Sharpie and we send them to the bathroom and have them write some kind of pearl of wisdom on the old shithouse wall in there. So
what I wrote was, the person who controls the questions controls the emotions. The person who controls the emotions controls the outcome. So why does this relate to this conversation? The kinds of questions that we ask ourselves and the world around us control the emotions. And once we have control of our emotions, we control the outcome. And so for example, instead of saying, why does my life suck? And getting a particular emotion out of that, you can say, why is my life amazing? And you can do this every single day. You can do it 50 times a day. Why is my life amazing? Well, it's amazing because I'm able to sit here with Will Wisner and have a conversation about something that's been a part of my life since I was 9 years old. Why is my life amazing? Well, I get to serve active military veterans and first responders and helping them get back to who they know themselves to be before the trauma. Why is my life so amazing? Because I have a wife that loves me totally and completely. Why is my life? You see what starts to happen?
Oh yeah, you're rephrasing the way your agreement. You're changing your agreements.
Exactly,
right? Yeah.
right. But I mean, we forget to do this as human beings.
Oh, for sure.
And we remember that. And when we remember that we can do that, remember, like instead of dismember, to remember ourselves is to put us back together.
Yeah, that's what that's one of my very favorite quotes. Talking about quotes on the old bathroom wall in there. Noelle Robinson left a doozy. I love that one. Says, healing is not about fixing yourself. It's about remembering who you were before someone told you you're broken or that you're somebody else now. This is how you are now.
Yeah,
and that's true. I absolutely believe that in my bones. I've seen that over and over again.
Yeah.
And so how now when we're talking about this modality in terms of healing for PTSD or complex PTSD or just depression, anxiety, whatever it may be, how is that playing out?
Great question. So I'm gonna for that I'm gonna reference fragrance hypnosis. Okay. So I work with people all over the world over Zoom, and then I work with everybody, or I work with people in person for fragrance hypnosis. Because we're doing something called an induction early in the process of hypnosis, I need to get you to a state of relaxation. If you don't know me and haven't spent a lot of time with me, right, there's always going to be an element of stranger danger. Sometimes people are a little afraid of hypnosis because they think they're giving up control. That's not the case at all. In all cases, you're actually giving yourself back the control by allowing yourself to enter into a relaxed state of being, and then you're actually telling me how to program you for what you want, whether you want self-confidence, quit smoking, lose weight, anything you're dealing with mentally. Well, how fragrance hypnosis works is this. The deeper the healing, the deeper the relaxation. The deeper the relaxation, the deeper the healing. So you'll notice that as we've been doing this, do you notice a little bit of tiredness or feeling a little bit of, So you hold a lot of stress. I love you to death. And you also hold a lot of stress. I've been watching your body as I have been burning or warming a couple of these fragrances, and you're like, I want to fall asleep now.
Oh, I'm comfortable.
Yeah,
my mind's clear. But yeah, you're right. I feel very relaxed, man.
But that's the point that I want to make here is that it is not uncommon for people to fall asleep in what I do, because for most people, they hold so much stress that the only time they let it go is right before they go to sleep.
Yeah.
And so as I'm beginning to work with people to recenter themselves, program them for new ways of being, is that these particular fragrances will allow you to deeply, deeply relax your mind, your body, and your spirit. And when you do that, then you're able to accept new forms of programming for your life to make it better. So when I'm able to create that relaxation through the fragrances, through what I call conversational hypnosis. Okay, well, let's take a deep breath, right? Then you create subconscious and conscious agreement. And oftentimes in life is that we're not even aware of our subconscious. But once we create that subconscious and conscious agreement, like if I say I want to quit smoking, I don't go tell the devil I'm going to quit smoking, because the devil will show up tomorrow on my front porch with a pack of cigarettes, right? So when I want to make a change, I'm just going to allow it to happen. I'm going to use my therapist, my hypnotist, whomever, to get into a relaxed state and then be able to introduce these new thoughts and ideas that you told me that you wanted, and so that's one way that this goes to work. But for example, if you need deep healing and relaxation, we might start you with sandalwood and frankincense. If, for example, that doesn't work, I might go to a spikenard and labdanum mix, because those become more and more heavy and intense. If you're somebody who's quitting smoking and you have a lot of phlegm in your system, which most people do who smoke, well, then I might do a number of other different types of fragrances that actually start to actually get that out of your body faster. So there's a mix of both chemicals and science and spirituality and energy that, when put together, creates powerful transformation.
So yeah, I want to ask you about that in terms of. I'm sure you have an understanding of how these fragrances can become an expectorant or whatever we're talking about here.
Right.
That's pretty modern kind of scientific knowledge. So 800 years ago when this was the thing in Japan, how did they understand what's the mechanism? How did they understand the mechanism to work?
Well, what we're now tapping into is what I would call shamanic knowledge in many ways, right? The word shaman didn't originate, all over the world. It originated
Nepal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in that whole area, up near Russia, things like that. But the idea that, here's how I normally tell it. Shortly after the advent of fire, right? We're like, oh, fire keeps us warm. We need to throw things on it. So you throw some wood on there, no problem. But then one day somebody throws something on there and you're like, oh, I feel really good. If it was 5 leaves, you feel really, really good, right?
Yeah.
Right? But they started to notice that when you would burn certain things, you would feel differently.
Right.
Or things would happen, right? Juniperus virginianus, red cedar here in this part of the country, right? Mm-hmm. Some people are allergic to it, but when you use it, it literally works as a very powerful expectorant to get things out of your lungs. And so what I believe, call it whatever you want, shaman, medicine person, whatever, but these tribes would designate somebody. It's like, okay, Will, I need you to keep track of when I burn this, what happens to the people in our tribe.
Yeah.
And you would start to develop the medicine knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're reading about, the Europeans arriving in North America, almost every single one of the passages that I've read over the years, it's like, this man knew a lot about the natural plants that were there. Mm-hmm. This was a natural part of what we did.
Yeah, it was just life.
It was just life, right? Like, if you don't want to take ibuprofen, go make some willow bark tea.
Right.
Right? If your stomach's upset, don't go and get Tums.
Get some mint.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. You're tracking me, right? But this is something that was common knowledge for everybody that now in the last 30 years I've seen become more and more common.
Yeah. I think people are waking up to the fact that we've lost more than we've gained. And, we were talking earlier. I remember it escaped my brain earlier. It just came back. Check that out, how that works. But, I think that John D. Rockefeller is the kickoff point, right? He figured out how you could suspend basic understanding of alkaloids and plant compounds in petroleum. Mm-hmm. So he's just looking for another use for his oil. I think the Germans were doing coal tar and suspending kind of the same things. And the dude made a whole medical school industry on this thing and changed our entire reality and the paradigm of what we understand medicine to be. Mm-hmm. And to the point where, 15 years down the road from that, if you were a medical practitioner, working the old ways, I guess at that point, pre-1913, you're a quack. Oh. And, so what has that gotten us? Well, that's gotten us now, fast forward to 2026, where we are here today. We are now having to go testify before, the powers that be on why we should be allowed to use these natural plant remedies that have been around and understood forever, and they have obvious benefits. And, the mechanism that's in place there that's confounding the whole thing is the FDA and going from Schedule 1 studies. It's no one's going to invest in something that they can't patent. So who's going to put that tons of money and effort that goes into doing a clinical study for a class 1 substance, which in this case we're talking about something as simple as marijuana or something as powerful as ibogaine. That's kind of the spectrum. That's the mechanism, is that you can't get past the FDA. Yeah. Why can't we get past the FDA? Well, because we have to go with what we know is proven through clinical research, which is oftentimes these synthetics that are sometimes petroleum-based, sometimes other things, but always generally not good for you. Mm-hmm. And so we will reject those things that our ancestors fully understood that had promise, but we can't access them because there's no clinical research. Mm-hmm. Therefore, we have to use the stuff that's killing us because we have studied it and we understand the fact that it could kill us.
Yeah.
That's insane.
It is insane. I mean, when you had Alina on a couple of weeks ago, and Hugh actually looked right at you and said, "Wait, to take pharmaceuticals for more pharmaceuticals to get more pharmaceuticals."
That's exactly it.
Like that was a great quote. Not great because in a positive way. It's just this is where we are.
That's where we are.
And people go, "Oh, I should go take a pill." No, let's look holistically.
Right.
At who you are, not just one aspect of it, because you're not just one aspect of it. Are you your finger? Well, if I cut your finger off, you're still you. At what point are you not you?
Right.
Therefore, it is a holographic experience. Your mental, physical, I dare I say it, religious, all of these, it's all unified. And we're trying to treat these things compartmentalized when it's not compartmentalized. We are an entire universe sitting in our chairs having a conversation inside of a universe, inside of another universe, inside of another universe, ad infinitum, right? And so this is a way to go into the worlds out and in. It is a way to unify the external and the internal.
Yeah, going back to the Hermetic stuff, right?
Exactly.
As within, so without.
Yeah.
Right.
As above, so below. The universe is mental.
That's right.
All of this is that, everything we're looking at right now has been created by someone's mind.
Yes, and man, there's so much we could go down so many rabbit holes. We only have so much time. Yeah, we're already up in an hour. But I tell you what, if you have some time, maybe we'll stick around because maybe we'll do some bonus content that we may push out somewhere. Because I definitely want to talk to you about the Hermeticism stuff. That's also one of my passions.
Oh, is it?
Yes,
Very
it
cool.
is.
Very cool.
So we got some cool things to talk about. But where I want to focus here and kind of wrap this guy up for today. What I understood you to say earlier was that folks that come and set with you get a packet of some sort that kind of gives a breakdown of here's the different incense, this is where you get it, and this is what you use it for.
Yep.
So that seems like a pretty good entry point for someone that's wanting to work with something that's of this caliber. Because I didn't know that you could buy that stuff. I assumed you had like secret trade routes or something. So now that I know that, and I do burn a lot of incense, and so I need to get rid of my money and all the other ones, and start upgrade, I guess, my collection. How do people get access to that? How do they find you? How do they set with you? How can they engage this process?
So the easiest way is to go to the website. It's Shihan-wellness.com. So SHIHAN-wellness.com. Also, I'm everywhere on social media, so I'm really easy to find. But I do want to answer another one of your specific questions. I'm happy to answer any question that anyone asks because it's actually a part of my promise as a Komoto. But I also, with my students, is that sometimes if someone wants more advanced training or to go spend a little more time, I'll actually have one of my students work with them. So all you have to do is ask a question. And then we will find a solution for you. I want to share this though because I'm going to leave you with a gift. So,
thank you.
So this is Spec Ops water. Hydration is the mission, right? And so I was in Newport Beach, California, at a place called the Village Tea Hut, and I was giving a weekend of incense journeys and traditional Japanese incense ceremonies. And two of the people that were in the audience, they came up to me afterwards, and the gentleman, their husband and wife team. He came up to me and he goes, "So you mentioned your work with Special Operations Charity Network in regards to the incense." And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, what are the odds that you work with Special Operations Charity Network when we're starting a water company called Spec Ops Water?" And I said, "I don't know what the odds are, but we are definitely, going to work together." So what's great about this group is that they support the work that I do. They support the work of Special Operations Charity Network. And then by proxy, they support our relationship, and so I'm going to leave you with this because it's a fantastic product. You'll love the water. It's a veteran and a first responder. They're married, but it's such a wonderful product. So I just want to make sure you.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, and I was talking to Mark Quinn there from Special Operations Charity Network, and we were talking about that the other day, and I was quite intrigued. So I'm thrilled to see you come walking into the studio today with the whole case of that. We will probably drink one and then put it on the shelf or something, keep it there, and see if we can help spread the word on that. And I guess where can you get Spec Up water if you're here listening? Can you order it online?
Yeah.
Or?
So it's specopswater.com, and you can get that. But I mean, it's great. Like I think it's better than any water that's out there. And I've tasted lots of water, Will.
Well, and I thought that was kind of weird here about like 2 years ago, something like that. Maybe I get the Liquid Death, which I think is probably these guys' bigger competitor that they're going up against. And I'm like, canned water, okay. I tried. You know what? I liked it, and I thought it was crazy because I always give my wife trouble. Yeah. She's big on that Evian brand of water, and I was like, what the hell are you talking about, man? Just get the damn cheap stuff. It's right there next to it, same stuff.
Yeah.
No, she swears up and down it's not, and I cannot convince her otherwise. To me, it just tastes like water. But it was that water in a can. First time I tasted it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is. There's something better about this. So, yeah, I'm a believer on that. But, yeah, we will definitely spread the word and put the link and everything down in the show notes of this episode because, we do a lot of work with you guys from Special Operations Charity Network, and we're always looking to support, the community and our partners. And there's a lot of stuff we do together, so supporting you all helps support us.
If you're watching this and you don't know about the integration weekend that Grunt Style Foundation presents coming up in September, really be a part of it because I have met so many amazing people out of that. You're incredible. Like how you lead that entire weekend, Will, is inspiring and moving. Who you bring in, like it's incredible. And I'll do incense all day, every day, all 3 days.
And you do too, man. God damn, you are a workhorse, dude. Like from the time that sucker starts to the time she closes down, John's doing his thing. And that is an incredible example, not only of your commitment, but for your passion, for that work. Because you think about it, that's kind of hard work, just going nonstop like that. And it's really cool because anybody could just kind of come into that class anytime and just pick right up on. So it just goes all the way around the whole time. But yeah, thank you very much for doing all of that. And thanks for being a part of that.
Thank you.
The interesting thing about integration is most of those folks, not everybody, but most of them are my teachers. These are the people that I came across in my weird little journey trying to figure out how to not die. And they all contributed something to the big pot there of the stew that's kept me going. And the folks that have come and taught, much like yourself, when I've kind of come to know you through that work, you have become, a mentor and a teacher in your own right. And what makes that event especially special, I guess, for me, is that everybody that comes gets to learn and be mentored by these teachers as well. And so they become, you're all's teachers too. And we're all kind of just one big group. And I think that's just a beautiful thing. And it's a magical weekend.
All of the people that you bring for that are amazing. Who's the gentleman who's going to be leading up the initiative that you just announced?
Justin Z.
Justin's great.
Yes, he is. Great. He's an Iowa Scarrow from the Peruvian lineage.
Yeah.
And he's a man of many talents. He's an herbalist. Yep. That guy is also a hermeticist. And that dude can make the craziest concoctions, and you would appreciate it for the fragrance and stuff. But he makes this. It's not like the traditional Florida water you buy at the weird bookstore or any of that. But it's kind of the same thing, and it's very floral and fragrant. Man, that stuff, you spritz that in the air, and it reminds me of your incense. It's just that good. He's that kind of a caliber guy. But we're thrilled to have him. And I don't know what you're doing later in the year. We haven't nailed our dates down, but Justin's going to be leading some cohorts for us down through the Sacred Valley in Peru. Oh, wow. So we're going to take some cohorts down there. So come along, man. We'll do some cool stuff.
One more thought that I'm going to leave you with, because we were talking about different cultures. Is that, for example, frankincense obviously comes from Oman and different places like that in the Middle East. Copal comes from South America. What's really interesting is that the terpenic profile of both frankincense and copal is very, very similar. So you're getting a very similar experience in different parts of the world from things that are created by the divine. So I'm really glad that you represent Justin, who again is fantastic, and I'm very excited to see what he's going to be able to create. I just want to acknowledge you, Will. you move through your stuff so powerfully, and you're such a huge stand for people that you are an inspiration, and that's just not words. I mean, like
thank you, man.
If you go and watch the highlight video from any of the integrations, like, you know, you are 100% standing for veterans, active military.
We try.
Well, no, you do. You know, try is a BS word. And here's what I love about you, dude. Mm-hmm. You do it.
Yeah.
I mean, but and I just want you to get that.
I appreciate the fact that you see me, because I am very passionate about this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I came home and got into this line because I was really sick and didn't have a lot of help in that journey. And so I had to kind of find it on my own. And it was men like you and Justin and Carlos and Jalen and all these other incredible people that I've come across that are carrying these incredible medicines and modalities that have kept me alive. And it is through that work that I'm like, this is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life, is I'm going to try to bring as many people as I can into a different path. I don't care what the path is, just reject the status quo, because what we have is nonsense.
Yes.
And there are better ways.
Yes.
Well, all right, John. Well, thank you very much again, my friend, for being here. It's always a pleasure to have you. And if you folks watching at home would like to connect with John Launius, how do they do that?
So it's Shihan-Wellness.com, Shihan-Wellness.com, or any of my social medias. Just send me a note, connect with me, and you can find me.
All right. What if somebody wants to become a student?
So we can have that conversation. There's a traditional process. Mm-hmm. It doesn't cost anything, but there's a traditional process where you meet the other students, and just to make sure that you're vibing in the right way.
Yeah, it's important.
Yep.
Well, all right. Thank you, everybody, for joining in again today. You can find us online at a variety of places. You can catch our YouTube channel, search YouTube for Grunt Style Foundation. You can also find us at the Grunt Style Foundation on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. You can also find us on TikTok at GruntStyle_Foundation, and finally on X at GruntStyleFDN. So you'll probably have to pause your video, go back and watch that to catch it. We'll try to put that in the show notes too. And if you feel so inclined to support the great work of the Grunt Style Foundation, you can do so by heading over to our website at www.gruntstylefoundation.org. You can also go to gruntstyle.com and go over to the Grunt Style Foundation section of the website and view our collection of t-shirts that support the work of the foundation, where we get a little bit extra that comes to us from our supporters over there at the Grunt Style LLC, our parent company. And I guess that's about it, man. Do you have any final words, John? You want to say anything?
Thank you, and talk to y'all soon.
All right. Stay waxy, everybody. We'll see you next time. The Grunt Style Foundation continues fighting for those who have served. Support our mission at gruntstylefoundation.org/donate. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and keep moving forward with purpose.